chug, 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 chug.
Welcome back to the Wizard Staff. I'm your host, Guy.
And I'm Blake.
And we are two drunk novices who like to talk about ED8. We drink and swear, so you've been warned. Please drink responsibly when you're talking about children's card games. Tonight, we ask the question, is Brawl good for Commander?
Guy, why are we talking about this question when Brawl's been out for so long?
I just kind of imagined crickets right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. So the reason why we're talking about Brawl right now is because we received 4 new Brawl decks with the release of Throne of Eldraine. And even though Brawl was announced more than a year ago...
Is it more than a year at this point? God.
It was released with Dominaria.
Fuck.
I remember that because they wanted to like really push the legendaries in Dominaria. And so when Brawl came out, they talked about how, you know, you could pretty much build from any of the new cards that were coming. There was a lot of hype. And then like there was almost no following afterwards. It kind of just fell flat on his face, like first step it took.
I feel like such an indentured player. I'm just like, I remember when Brawl was introduced like it was yesterday.
Yeah, and I've only been playing for 2 years now at this point. So tonight we're going to ask, is Brawl good for Commander? With the release of Brawl, there was some cards that kind of, you know, bypass the standard into Brawl and then can then be used in Commander. So we're going to evaluate those and just see, is this something that, you know, Commander can benefit from? But before we get into that, Blake, what are we drinking?
So we decided to go with Miller High Life, the champagne of beer.
Because much like Brawl is the champagne of Magic. I guess it's more like the Miller High Life of
Yeah, I'd say
Magic.
It's more like the Miller High Life of Magic. It's just like...
Yeah, because...
You can find it anywhere. Generic.
It's cheap.
It's
very generic. What do you think of Miller High Life?
Man, I haven't drank this stuff in a very long time, like since college, where it's like, I just want volume and efficiency in me. I'm still gonna finish this, but it's like, okay, I just know the possibilities of all the better things in life.
Yeah, it's funny because this is the first time we've also kind of aligned on like the exact same drink.
Yeah, like I was thinking about that. It's like it's been so long since we've actually gotten the same drink like properly.
Like the exact same drink.
Yeah.
Because when we drink white wine, we kind of get in the idea, but
they're different brands. It's like...
We both have Miller High Life. Like this is for the 40 some episodes that we've done now. We've probably like gotten 4 out of 40. So for every 1 out of 10.
That's passing, right?
That is far from it, Blake.
Oh, damn.
So, is Brawl good for Commander? Brawl? What is Brawl? Probably everyone is asking that question as they're listening. We want to note that we did not include Brawl in our Format 101 and 102 episodes because who the fuck even plays Brawl?
Savage.
So, Brawl was announced alongside the release of Dominaria back in 2018. Brawl is very similar to Commander with the following exceptions.
So, players in multiplayer games start at 30 life, not 40. Players in one-on-one start at 25. And then decks consist of 60 cards, not 100. Any planeswalker can be a commander, regardless of whether you have the ability to become a commander or not. Only cards from standard legal sets can be used. Consequently, Brawl uses its own banned and restricted list. Commander damage rules do not apply, and you can use multiple copies of any one basic land in decks with a colorless commander. Just because otherwise you'd be totally screwed because there's no wastes.
So currently, Sorceress Spyglass is the only card banned in Brawl. Why? Who knows, and who fucking cares? Yeah, though the format has been out for more than a year with very little following, we have to ask, or we have to say, like, why are we asking this question now? Why didn't we ask this question with the release of Brawl?
Well, things have changed.
Well, things have changed, and we also weren't a podcast at that time. Since there was no following of Brawl or as much support for it as there is now, we really didn't think it was relevant to bring up. It all starts with a little card called Arcane Signet. Alongside the Throne of Eldraine release, there was an announcement for 4 pre-constructed decks to be used in the Brawl format. Very similar to what we get every year with Commander. We had Tulane, Teller of Tales, Corvode, the Fey Cursed King, Alila, the Provocateur, and Sir Gwen. The most highly anticipated card, arguably from this release, was Arcane Signet, which is a 2-mana rock that taps for 1 color in your commander's color identity. People lost their shit over this card when it was first announced because
People went crazy.
if you were pre-ordering this card, you were a sucker. It was almost the new Soul Ring, or it is kind of the Soul Ring of Brawl, since it would go just about in every deck that runs more than 1 color. Or even, I feel like in Brawl you would still want to run it because it's one of the only good mana rocks for that format.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that, yeah.
So the card was created to help keep these new Brawl decks from getting mana screwed, since ramping in Brawl is very restrictive because you have a much more limited card pool since you're only pulling cards from Standard. So by creating this little mana rock to help fix the problem in Brawl, there became a new issue that arose for Commander, and that was the ability to just create cards like this seemingly out of nowhere that almost everyone is going to want. Is this healthy for the Commander format? So we're going to get into the positives and negatives of having Brawl around. I have been quite negative, but here are a few positives I'd like to share.
Go for it.
So first being, there have been some pretty great memes that have come out of making fun of Brawl. Like my very, very famous Salty Splatoon and Weenie Hut Jr. meme. When Brawl was first announced, I put that on Facebook and got over 1,000 likes. I mean, I don't want to brag, but like, I'm pretty fucking funny.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know this. Good on you.
Yeah, when it since I've tried doing it again I tried to resurface it with the release of Brawl, and a few people were like, I mean, yeah, I guess. But they were being more respectful to the format than when it was first announced. Like, it got a lot of heat, and people were just like, haha, yeah, Brawl sucks. They really didn't give it a chance. And maybe that's also my fault for, trying to add to that. And
you're part of the problem, guy. Be part of the solution.
Yeah, I know. All right, jokes aside, memes aside, let's get into the real positives.
Not possible.
So, starting now.
Okay.
WotC. So first, I'd like to say WotC did the right thing, including Arcane Signet in the collector's packs with Throne of Eldraine. Not only did this help increase the number of Arcane Signets in run, making them more accessible, but also more affordable, since there was a fear that these would only be available in the Brawl precons. God forbid it would stay at $30, or it would just add more to the problem.
Yeah, so like my question to you is, maybe I'm trying to figure out how to like word this question in a way that doesn't like sound biased, but it's like, is it good like printing super strong cards like Arcane Signet, like specifically, like in a Brawl precon, in order just to sell the product? Like, I kind of feel, in my perspective, it's just like WotC really needed to sell this product, so they put in a card that they knew was going to be a Commander staple. All the Commander players were going to buy their product, so they knew that they weren't going to like have a huge loss on this.
So right now I'm just going to speak to the marketability of the product and not the design aspect, because we're going to get into that a little more.
Okay.
But
I'm jumping the shark.
I'm going to play devil's advocate and say, like, don't you think that they include powerful cards in the Commander precons just so that they can buy and have a lot of success with those and can sell them and continue to make more?
I don't think the Commander precons have strong cards like Arcane Signet.
I mean, maybe not maybe not now, but like when they first came out and started printing Commander exclusive cards, like 6 or 7 years ago, there were probably cards that came out and people saw and were like, whoa, this is super powerful for Commander. Them it being like their first reactions. It's not like maybe in like 2 or 3 years we'll say like, yeah, Arcane Signet's good, but it's not as good as some of these others, or we'll kind of just think of it as more of a standard, not more of like a base level card. But I'm sure that WotC had a very similar strategy when they first made Commander precons, so I don't think that's necessarily too bad of a thing. I think part of we made this connection between all 4 of the Brawl legendaries that came out, but they were all pretty efficient at like drawing cards and ramping and kind of having high synergy with their decks. And I think they did that because really is kind of hard they had to design around the standard pool, and not necessarily the whole pool of cards that have ever existed, since Commander is an eternal format.
Right, and that's why they staple draw effects onto all of the Brawl precon commanders. Yeah.
I don't think it was a problem that, they had these like high power legendaries for Brawl, or, Arcane Signet, just to sell the product.
Well, maybe I can frame it in another way. I think maybe it's a little bit frustrating when WotC puts strong cards like Arcane Signet and Smothering Tithe and those shock lands in a Brawl precon, but not in a Commander precon. Like, I think they're addressing it like within this next year, but I know a big complaint is from like the Commander community is that Commander reprints haven't been the best in the Commander precons. So like what I'm saying is it's frustrating to see like all these cards we want in the Brawl precons and not the Commander precons. It's like, come on.
Oh, I mean, I totally agree, because they probably had some favoritism when it came to saying like, yeah, we're going to reprint the Shocklands and Smothering Ties into the Brawl precon. 1, because we want to sell this product, and 2, because, well, we don't want to reprint them twice necessarily, and it makes more sense for us to reprint them in the Brawl precons because these cards are currently standard legal, and we kind of need standard legal cards. We don't want to really deviate from either reprinting the card a bunch, which I mean isn't really a problem in my opinion. That really only affects the secondary market and not WotC themselves, but besides that, had a much more limited access of cards for that, so they probably said, okay, for these we're going to put into the Brawl precons just because Brawl precons use standard cards.
Alright, I'm fine with that answer for now. Well, I'll let you keep talking about the positives of Brawl because I have like a lot of negatives to say, so I'll let you keep talking your piece.
I alluded to this in our last point, but we did receive 4 awesome new commanders for the Brawl decks, and since they need to include standard legal cards, we got those good reprints.
Just indirectly.
Which I feel if they do this again, will be another like, yay, we get, maybe next year we'll get another couple good cards for Commander, and then they'll say like, okay, here's where, if they didn't get them then, they can get them here. So I think it's good that they're able to do that. You have like a second chance, because they're probably designing now cards in like the future league, which is the league at WotC, where they're playing 3 years ahead of time, and so they're just play testing a lot of the cards to kind of see like how they interact with each other, and then they can make tweaks before they go to final print. But now they're probably like having to consider like not only for standard but for Brawl, and I feel like since Brawl being so similar to Commander, a lot of these things are going to kind of change their perspective of like how the colors work and like how can we make it better, because as we've often talked about, like white sucks at card draw, and so as they do the future league and they start to see like, ooh, a lot of these white commanders or for Brawl aren't doing so hot, how can we do more white things to help them out, creating card advantage, or maybe they'll come up with a more creative way of card draw for whites. If it's everyone draws cards, and then you're able to like benefit from that.
I feel like that's a little bit of a stretch, but all right.
Maybe it's a stretch, but I feel like it's pretty hopeful. And I don't know, who's listened to more episodes of Drive to Work at this point?
Oh, shut the fuck up.
It would be hard for me to believe that. I know that they're kind of on a time crunch, so maybe they're not giving as much attention to Brawl. It has to be there to some degree. And with the continuation of Brawl becoming more popular, hopefully they'll be able to do as I said and kind of consider like how the cards, interact in multiplayer format, and then they can play to some of the weaknesses and strengths when it comes to designing cards for multiplayer.
Okay. Well, now that we've like lived that fever dream of like happy possibilities, do we want to talk about all of the problems with Brawl?
I had one more positive, Blake.
Okay.
You're skipping over the big one.
I know. As you can tell, anyone listening, I'm still very negative about the format, and guys like, no, damn it, like this is good. It's okay.
We'll get to like our verdict in the end.
I think they can already tell.
The last positive I have, I want to begin with a quote, because constraints are a designer's best friend.
Who said that?
I forget.
Wow.
I'll try and look it up while you're talking at some point.
Unprofessional.
Shut up. So this quote starts in the positives, and about halfway through, it'll kind of lend itself into the negatives because it's relevant to both sides. Starting to stutter because getting drunk. Champagne beer is A-okay with me. All right. So constraints are a designer's best friend. Brawl is a format that gives itself many constraints, more so than Commander.
A lot.
Singleton, flux of cards, the color restraints based on Commander, and so forth. So WotC really needs to come up with cards we haven't seen before, since it is designing around these constraints, arguably making more creative solutions, since you will dismiss a lot of the early go-to answers. First example, Arcane Signet. To me, Tome of Legends is a better example of a well-designed card for Brawl/Commander, since it is a card that relies more heavily on you to interact with your commander rather than it just coming into play and getting to work like Arcane Signet. Tome of Legends also encourages you to play your commander more so than Arcane Signet. It does not break Commander or Brawl. And it's also not a card that you want to include in every deck, but it's a card you might want to include in some of your decks. Some of your decks might need that card draw. And Tome of Legends could be an answer for that. I know I shit on it a little in our episode review, the Tome of Legends.
I feel like I brought you around on it though. I was like, yeah, this is actually decent in these highly specific situations in Commander. Yeah, woo!
It was a while ago, and also that episode was long and got a little drunk. But my personal feelings were getting in the way because, also, I was thinking about it very much in the sense of like, I want this to help out my mono white deck. But it was Avacyn, who is an 8-mana commander. So it's going to kind of be hard for me to like use Tome of Legends really efficiently.
Just cast Tome of Legends turn 2 and then cast Avacyn turn 3. What's the difficult problem here?
What's the difficult problem? I don't know. Play mono white, Blake. Constraints are a designer's best friend. That was the positive side. And now the negative side that I'd like to get into with cards like Arcane and Signet and Tome of Legends is that they are made in a vacuum, with the idea they'll only problem solve for the Brawl format right now. I don't think WotC has the time, energy, or resources to consider Commander when they build cards like this. Since Commander is an internal format that has access to a much larger library of cards, it concerns me that the idea of just being able to make cards to help the Brawl format can cause problems in EDH. Though Arcane Signet and Tome of Legends aren't necessarily auto-includes, Arcane Signet can be considered probably a staple for any deck with...
I'd call it a staple.
Yeah, for 3 or more colors.
I would even say like 2 or more colors.
But then it just makes decks more consistent and efficient, and that in itself is a problem because it just kind of makes deck building a little more boring, because it's like, all right, now I have 3 automatic slots and now I only have to pick out 96 other cards. So it would be like Soul Ring, Command Tower, Arcane Signet. And if they just keep making a new card with this for each Brawl pre-constructed deck, because they're going to want to sell, unless they just keep reprinting Arcane Signet a bunch, which can get a little tiring, though I guess you do that with Soul Ring a bunch.
I mean, we're kind of getting into a different topic of like the nature of staples and how they interact with eternal formats, but that's another episode. We say that a lot. That'll be another episode. Let's just keep pushing that back.
Yeah, but we promise it'll be another episode. But I guess the bottom line of that is, like, I then fear that Brawl will create too many staples, because it'll just have to either stick to cards reprinting a bunch, or it'll have to consistently come up with new ways to, like, fix its very specific problems in a much more smaller card pool.
Yeah, that is possible. I agree with you.
Now you can talk about your negatives.
Oh boy. Like, Brawl's been around for a while, and things have changed. As I currently understand it now, Brawl is dominated by Oko decks and Nissa Who Shakes the World decks. Because, keep in mind, Oko can be your commander and so can Nissa, because they're planeswalkers within the standard legal set. Like, I've heard it been argued that certain planeswalkers recently have been, like, heavily pushed by the company and in order to, like, sell products, and I would agree with that. Like, do you remember reviewing Oko and being like, wow, this is actually a really good planeswalker? Because I was like, as I remember it, because I'm never impressed by planeswalkers except for War of the Spark set review, and that was like the only exception. And now Oko.
Yeah, I said Oko was top 2 of the best cards in the set.
Yeah, I think so.
Though I was kind of thinking in the commander specifically, but turns out Oko is the best card in the set, just in general, for all formats. Mm-hmm. Arguably the best planeswalker too.
So, quick side note, my friend pointed it out to me, but like a lot of those Oko memes about like elk, like half of them are elk, and like the images used for the memes are half of them are elk and half of them are deer. And once he pointed it out to me, I was like, oh my god, this is awful. I hate everything. He's right. This annoys me. And I don't know how I missed it, because like I'm like majored in environmental studies, and I'm just like, oh, I can't unsee this now. And it's terrible. So half the time I'm just like, it's a fucking deer, it's not an elk. Oh my god, these people don't know it. So that's my side story.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Breaking news, as Oko, Thief of Crowns, has been banned in Brawl, but only on Arena for some reason? Like, what's going on? Oh my gosh. Anyway, back to whatever you were listening to.
Getting back on track, like the other major problem with Brawl that I think people knew from the very beginning was that you can't really build 4 or 5 color decks, just because it's not really within the standard card pool. Like, the lands just don't really allow it. And now I can hear some of you saying, and I kind of agree with you, which is, like, maybe that's actually a good thing, because historically speaking, as far as I understand it, 4+ color decks in standard like formats are notoriously like known for dominating a format, because you can just stretch, like, if you just have perfect mana, you can just cast spells with like the most ridiculous of casting costs and with really powerful effects, and it's just like, this is like insane. So maybe that's actually a good thing and not actually a bad thing. But in my view, it's like, wow, you're basically limited to 3, like even 3 color is hard, and like 3 color, maybe 2 color, and like 1 color. And then you can't, like,
Whoa.
Yeah, and then if you do colorless, you have to do like regular basics instead of wastelands, because they're not in the standard rotation. And just like, how weird is it to, like, I don't know, like play your colorless like commander and then you just have all your islands? That just feels weird. So that's a super nitpick, but it's like, I don't know, that just feels very limiting to me, where it's like, oh, you can only play like these certain color combinations, and then, oh, you want to build a 5 color deck? Fuck you, you can't. It's like literally impossible.
And so a future problem I can see with this is it's only a matter of time before you are able to build. I mean, I think Niv Mizzet Reborn is 5 colors, so he can be your commander in Brawl at the moment.
Yeah, good luck casting him.
I don't know if there are any other WooBird commanders, but there is going to be an audience for the 4 color and 5 color commanders. WotC's gonna have to give in and make some, and then have to problem solve for, like, alright, in this standard card pool, how are we gonna be able to let them do that efficiently where it's not that they get mana screwed every time?
Right, it's kind of like what you alluded to earlier, Guy, which is like, is the answer just print more Arcane Signet-like effects to get that color fixing? And then, like, well, then that screws with Commander, and then Commander people will both love and hate it extremely.
It is scary in that thought. Oh, quick side note, but Andy Rutledge is the one who first said constraints are a designer's best friend.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's a very good quote. And I'll let you talk, but then I want to kind of give an example of how I relate to this at my own work as a designer, and why I think that, you know, again, designing in the very limited space can be a problem.
Oh yeah, like, I'll just wrap it up, because like I only really have one more point, and that's the one pretty much everyone's known about since the beginning, the biggest problem with the format in general is that it's a rotating format. Like, that is the biggest problem here. It's the biggest weakness. Like, Brawl, and this is another one of my biggest issues, is that the way Brawl was presented to the community was like, hey, you like Commander? Here's basically a Commander variant. It's basically like Commander. Like, it was explained to people, like, here's Commander, but here's all, like, how it's slightly different. So it's really trying to appeal to that specific subgroup within the MTG community, and trying to, like, target those people as their buyers for this product. And like the EDH community, it's like we play it because it's a non-rotating format. You're giving us literally like exactly the opposite of what we want, a format that's constantly rotating, because like that's why most people have like started playing Brawl, then their deck rotated out after they came back for a while, and then they stopped playing. And I'm not saying anything new, everyone's known about this. So like, at least on paper, and I guess this is now where I kind of lead into, at least on paper, Brawl basically doesn't exist. It doesn't really ever happen on paper. But the one thing WotC was smart about is they took it to Arena, where you can play 1v1 Brawl. So that's more of where I see Brawl succeeding, which is it's late at night, but you don't quite want to go to bed yet. You maybe have like 1 or 2 hours before you have to fall asleep. And you're like, man, I really just want to play some Magic. And you go online and go in Arena and play some Brawl. And I'm like, all right, I had fun. And then you go to bed. I think it can exist much more successfully on a digital format than in paper. Because on paper, it's basically dead. And at least online in a 1v1 Brawl format, people are playing tons of Arena. It's super successful, so there's a good chance you already have like a ton of like Brawl staples, or at least cards that are good in Brawl. Do you agree with me there? I like, you can still talk about like your point that you were going to talk about, but I just want your input here. Like, do you think them putting Brawl in Arena was good?
Oh, I definitely think with the 4 pre-constructed decks, and then the sudden announcement that Brawl was coming to Arena was a really good idea. I mean, if they hadn't done that, it's almost like Frontier at that point, which was a Magic format they announced and like pretty much died. Oh, because nobody played it.
That also reminds me, it's like, so you know how there's Commander precons, and then people are like, oh my god, this is so cool, I'm gonna upgrade this and make it really powerful and make it special to myself, and I'm gonna play this a ton. Like, that just doesn't happen with the Brawl precons. Literally, what happened was like the Brawl precons come out, all these Commander players are like, oh cool, I want that for Commander, and bought it. That's what happened, instead of, oh, I'm a Brawl player, oh, a Brawl precon came out, I'm gonna upgrade it and play Brawl in paper at my local LGS. That might be like one person in the entire world. It just doesn't happen. Like, that's
yeah. I have a picture, and I'll put it in the video. I forget who and where, but it was sometime during the summer of 2018, shortly after Brawl was announced.
Oh yeah.
They had a Brawl event, and like there was some money on the line, and literally one person signed up. And he just won automatically because he was his only opponent. I think he had a Gruul deck. I forget who it was.
All these specific detail, but all right.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of, I mean, it really just kind of added fire to the.
He could have played
Brawl
Uberg
meme.
and still won.
Yeah, really, he could have. Something I wanted to say though, to me, the rotation of Standard into Brawl was more of a neutral. Because I do know that it's kind of annoying to like change your deck every so often, but I think that could add variance to Brawl, where it's, you know, instead of like, because like I feel like for me with every set there might be like 1 or 2 cards that I want to slot into one of my decks. It's not like let me take a bunch and put them in.
Okay, so let's talk about this, because I slightly agree with you, where it's like, I think especially if you listen to our earlier episodes, I was like much harsher on formats that rotated, and since then I've really come to realize, you know, for some people that's really what they prefer. They prefer rotating formats. It keeps things fresh. They want the constant change in environment, the constant like exciting new, oh, what's the new meta gonna look like? They like the constant changing meta. And I understand that.
Standard is considered the most popular format outside of probably Commander, because it has the largest following outside of Commander, because Commander is kind of what you play on the side. And I feel like WotC was like, Standard plus Commander, two of the most popular formats. We're on to something. Hold on. Brawl.
Okay, here's my issue though. It wasn't really. It's fine that people like rotating metas, and that's like the Standard crowd. But the problem is Brawl was not marketed towards Standard players. It was marketed towards Commander players. That's where my issue is, where it's like it was directed towards the wrong section of the MTG community and the way they prefer to play the card game. It's like, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so it's sort of almost been like to the Standard players, hey, look at this kind of Commander variant. A lot of Standard players start playing it. Then it gets the following, and then Commander players are like, oh, this might be something I want to get interested in. And then say like they could build their Brawl decks and then, you know, get the support from Brawl pre-con decks that we got. But rather their idea was, okay, let's get the Commander players who are kind of like tired and casual into the very competitive set, or this very competitive format of Standard by giving them Brawl, and Commander players were like, nah, that's okay.
Yeah, I just think it was directed towards the wrong audience, because if they had originally announced like Brawl as like, hey, there's this new format and you can play it online, and then address it towards the Standard players, I think it would have been much more successful. And then they would have released the paper pre-cons, and it just would have, I think, been like a better reception by players. And yeah, that's my piece.
I would agree to that, definitely. But I feel like they've probably kind of learned their lesson, and now they're doing it in a way where, okay, we started by trying to like market it towards the Commander players. Now, how are we actually going to get the Commander players? And then so that's why they had to come up with like Commander exclusive, or not Commander exclusive, because now they can be used for Brawl, but like cards like Arcane Signet and Tome of Legends that, you know, Commander players can use.
Okay, so I like kind of want to wrap up here, but I have a question that both of us can answer, and I can answer first. So it's like, in a year, do you think Brawl will still be a thing? And if yes, do you think it will be more supported or less supported? Because in the macro scale of time, Magic formats come and they die. Like there have been so many formats that have come and gone and died, like Tiny Leaders, and I can just list a bunch. Like, do you think Brawl will just be one of those or not? Because my answer to the question is yes, I think Brawl will be here in a year simply because WotC is essentially throwing money at the format in the form of putting it on Arena and creating paper precons.
I think, yes, it will be here in a year. Though, I want to say, like, if they hadn't had done this with Eldraine, I feel like it would have just died. Because it was kind of getting to the point of, like, who plays this? Why should we care? Really just kind of like a, hey, that was a thing for a very short bit. We had a good few laughs. Let's move on and really only care about the things that we actually care about, which is Commander and Standard. But since that they're giving so much support and they really want it to be a success by giving us these pre-constructed decks and putting it onto MTG Arena in at least a year, I still think it'll be around. Because I feel like with the success of how the Brawl decks sold, they're going to want to redo this again.
Yeah.
So
that's something for all of you listeners. Like, you basically vote with your money. If you want a product to come back in the future years, you buy the product. That's how a business works.
now I'd like to kind of get into my example
Yeah, go for
of why I think it's dangerous to kind of design in this vacuum. I am a designer at Old Navy, and I design for Toddler Boy Wovens. I have often thought of Toddler or designing for Old Navy similar to how you would design for Magic. And you gotta kind of, it sounds a little ridiculous in a way, but you kind of just have to hear me out.
Okay, I'm listening.
So we're often given like subjects or themes that we have to design into. So whether that's like holiday, whether that's like spring feelings, spring colors, there are a couple of different ways that you can go, but you kind of get the idea. When we need like a print for a shirt, we don't say what's going to work for us. We're not designing something that's only going to work for Toddler Boy necessarily, because if we did, we then take it to the store and it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's not something that's going to be able to match back to the parents, and it's going to kind of be like, yeah, this is cool, but it's not something that I want or need. It's kind of like if you're designing in the vacuum of only designing for one target audience, then it's not going to do so well for clothes or for Magic. But when we say like, okay, we need another print, we often have to say like, what is these other categories that we're designing for doing? How can we like follow them so that we do have this synergy between multiple platforms, so this will be able to sell the best. And so if you're only designing in the aspect of like, I'm problem solving for Brawl and not considering other things, it, instead of sticking out like a sore thumb and not going to sell, it's just going to, stick out like a sore thumb because it's going to be a problem in the way of like, I can now find ways to abuse, these new cards that, were only made for Brawl, but now I can use in Commander, or I don't know how Legacy or Vintage works, whatever. But does that make sense?
I believe so, where like you kind of have to think more holistically, and I think it kind of reminds me of like how Mark Rosewater will say like he designs certain cards for like different psychographs. He designs them for the Timmies and the Johnnies and the Spikes, a little bit of everything. That's kind of what it reminds me of.
Yeah, that's another really good example. Is you can't just design cards to like solve one problem. You have to think about it in the whole. I know it's kind of tough to think of like the cards that you're designing for Brawl, because it's more of like short-term fixes, whereas you need like to make sure they don't have long-term impacts.
All right.
Strong long-term impacts. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I realize I'm a little drunk, but I was like kind of like looking out the window. I was trying to like feel like I was being really smart, and then I realized I wasn't even looking at the mic, which was bad for the audio. And I was like, shit.
Trying to look out the window looking sophisticated. Nobody can hear the crazy person that you are.
Yeah, and I was going to say, like, oh, maybe we need to redo that. But, like, since I'm drunk, I probably don't remember. I wouldn't be able to do that again.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much.
I'm going to get into just last segment, our hopes for Brawl, or, like, the verdict we want to give it. So, for me, personally, for the last year and a half, I've made a lot of jokes about Brawl and how it is the Weenie Hut Jr. of Commander. But we are now in a time where Brawl has the chance to step up and prove me wrong. Will I turn to Brawl? Probably not.
Because it's a rotating format.
That's not the reason why, but it doesn't mean it can't gain my respect just because I mean, I have a lot of respect for people who play Standard, how competitive they can be. So Brawl can still like gain my respect, and I can respect the fact that you play it. But moving forward, I would just like to see less obvious solutions like Arcane Signet from WotC and more inventive solutions like Tome of Legends. So personally, I would give Brawl right now a 3.5 out of 5 with the small potential to increase. At the beginning of this year, or like post announcement of the pre-constructed Brawl decks, it probably would have been a 1 out of 5 for me. Where are you at, Blake?
I'm glad it's like made a good impression on you, I guess. I guess I'm not quite there. I was a 1 out of 5 also, and now I'd say I'm a 2 out of 5. I'm like a slightly less grumpy old man. Like, if you want to play Brawl on Arena before you go to bed, like, I think that's the way to do it. In almost every other situation, the format just sucks. And it will only stay alive because WotC keeps, like, if it focuses on putting stuff online. And I hear the counter argument to that, which is, well, if you put it online, you also have to put it on paper, and that's why they put out the Brawl precons. And because anything you put on paper, you have to put online, and vice versa. And to that I say, yeah, you're right. So I think when we see these paper precons come out and we complain like, oh, the paper isn't gonna survive, ho ho ho, aren't I clever? We gotta be like, all right, yeah, you're clever, whatever. Just like kind of get over that and acknowledge that, and just, I don't know, get over it.
Then if I could ask you a question, Blake, if you're a 2 out of 5 right now, what could WotC do to get you to at least a 3 out of 5? Ooh. To be about where I'm at right now?
Okay, so my answer would be, how would they get me from a 2 out of 5 to a 3 out of 5? I guess would be to somehow include 3 or 4 color decks without causing the Arcane Signet shitstorm. That if they can do that while still keeping the format balanced without creating like a tier 0 deck, I will be like impressed. They might even get me to a 4 out of 5 just for doing that accomplishment alone.
When we start to see more of these 4 color and Wooburg decks, that'll really be like the breaking point for me, because I fear for their solutions, but I'm like fearful, and I'm like 50% fearful, 50% optimistic that they'll be able to come up with something to make it work. And well, I'm positive they'll come up with something to make it work. My fear is it could be something that's negative, but optimistic that it would be something that wouldn't ruin EDH as a consequence.
Cool.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up now. Thank you very much for listening. You can find us on Twitter at thewizardstaff101. You can send us an email at thewizardstaff101@gmail.com. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Yeah. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope you have a great night. Peace.